The year is 479 BCE. On a beach near Salamis, the tide pulls at charred wood and broken shields. The sand is black with ash. The Persian fleet is gone, burned, scattered, defeated. Greece won. That's what the poets will say. That's what they'll carve into marble and sing in symposiums for the next 2,000 years. But there's something the victory songs never mention. Something that happened in the months before Salamis, during the Persian occupation. Something that continued even after the battles ended. Not on the battlefield, but in the administrative machinery of the largest empire the world had ever seen. This is the story of what happened to the women and girls of Greece during Xerxes' invasion. Not the sanitized version you'll find in most textbooks, but the documented reality preserved in Persian administrative records, Greek inscriptions, and archaeological evidence that scholars have pieced together over the last century. If you've ever wondered why certain chapters of history are told through the lens of men on battlefields, and not the women left behind in the ruins, you're about to find out. When Xerxes I invaded Greece in 480 BCE, he didn't just bring soldiers. According to Herodotus and Persian administrative records, he brought an entire bureaucratic apparatus. Scribes, officials, administrators whose job wasn't to fight, but to catalog everything the empire conquered. Every city that fell, every village that surrendered, and most importantly, every person who could be taken. The girls and young women were the priority. Not because the Persians were uniquely cruel in this regard. Many ancient empires engaged in similar practices, but because Xerxes understood something fundamental about conquest. You don't just defeat a people by killing their soldiers. You defeat them by absorbing their next generation. This wasn't random violence. It was imperial policy, documented in what scholars call the harem system. But that word, harem, doesn't capture what this institution actually was. It wasn't about pleasure or luxury. It was about control. About creating a generation of mixed-blood administrators who would owe loyalty to Persia, not to the lands their mothers came from. By the time the Persian army retreated after Salamis and Plataea, historical sources suggest that tens of thousands of Greek women and children had been taken. Most were shipped east to cities like Sardis, Susa, and Persepolis. Some were placed in the states as domestic laborers. Others, especially the young and those from noble families, were absorbed into the royal administrative system. The Persepolis fortification tablets, administrative documents that survived because they were baked in a fire when Alexander the Great burned the city in 330 BCE, provide glimpses into this system. These clay tablets record the movement of people, rations distributed, and the organization of imperial households. Among them are references to Greek women, cataloged and tracked like any other imperial resource. One translated seal from Persepolis, studied by archaeologist Ernst Herzfeld in the 1930s, records the delivery of Greek females to Susa, noting their ages and places of origin. They're described in the bureaucratic language of inventory management. Condition acceptable. This is where the horror becomes clear. These weren't spontaneous acts of wartime violence. This was systematic, administrative, a machine designed to process conquered peoples and integrate them into the empire. The camps where captives were held along the coast of Asia Minor weren't just holding pens. According to historical analysis, they served a darker purpose. The Persians had learned from previous conquests that immediate integration often failed. Women held on to hope that their cities would ransom them, that someone would come for them, that rescue was possible. But if you broke that hope first, if you stripped away their language, their names, their sense of identity, then integration became easier. The most effective way to break someone, the Persians discovered, wasn't through violence alone. It was through forced cultural erasure, through making them participate in forgetting who they were. There's a fragmentary Greek inscription from the 4th century BCE, found near Olympia. A woman named Claius from Corinth left these words: "I was Claius, daughter of Nicodemus. They took me in the year of the fire. They gave me a new name I will not speak. I served in the house of the king's cousin for 16 years. When they freed me, I have forgotten the hymns my mother taught me. I have come here to remember. This stone will remember for me. 16 years. She was 13 when taken, 29 when freed, and she had forgotten the hymns. That's not just enslavement. That's cultural annihilation. And it happened to thousands. By late 479 BCE, the first wave of Greek captives reached Susa, the administrative heart of the Persian Empire. For a girl from a Greek village, the city must have seemed impossibly alien. Columned halls stretched higher than any temple in Athens. Gardens bloomed with flowers that had no Greek names. And in the center of it all was the palace complex where the royal administrative system operated. According to the Persepolis fortification tablets, women entering this system were divided into ranks. At the bottom, domestic servants. Above them, concubines. At the top, those selected to bear children for Persian nobles. The goal wasn't pleasure. It was integration. The children born to Greek mothers and Persian fathers will be raised Persian, but with enough Greek heritage to serve as intermediaries, translators, administrators in the newly conquered territories. It was, in essence, genetic colonialism. One administrative tablet from 477 BCE records a girl named Thalia. She was 15 when she arrived at Susa. The tablet notes that she refused integration and was placed in what's called a disciplinary unit. Another document explains what this meant. Forced labor in the palace weaving rooms, 14 hours a day, minimal rations, no contact with other Greek women. The king's steward has taken me as a secondary wife. I have given him a son. He is beautiful. He has your eyes. That last sentence should haunt us. Because Roxanne survived. She was fed, clothed, elevated in status. She had a child. And in exchange, she gave birth to a son who would grow up Persian, who would never know his mother had once prayed to Athena, who would never sing the lullaby she learned as a girl in Thessaly. But assimilation, slow and methodical and bureaucratic, taking the daughters of your enemies and turning them into the mothers of your next generation of administrators that works. Some governed the very territories their mothers had once called home. Not all of them stayed in Persia. Some, very few, but some came back. In the decades after the Persian Wars, as Greek city-states solidified their power, a small number of women returned home freed, ransomed, or in rare cases escaped. But when they came home, they found that home didn't exist anymore. A woman named Harmonia returned after 12 years in Persian captivity. She was 28. She had a child with her, a boy half Persian, maybe 6 years old. The city of Eretria refused to recognize her citizenship. Her family refused to take her in. The reason is recorded in the city's legal archives. She had been defiled by barbarian touch and born a child of mixed blood. She and her son were turned away. The inscription ends there. We don't know what happened to them. He wrote, "They are like shadows. They move through the agra, but no one sees them." By the time Herodotus wrote his histories, the focus was entirely on battles, strategies, the glory of Greek resistance. He mentions Persian captives once, in a single line. Many Greeks were taken, but in time some returned. That's it. That's all he gave them. But the graves don't lie. Across Greece, archaeologists have found burial sites from the mid-5th century BCE containing women-s remains with signs of malnutrition consistent with long-term captivity, skeletal trauma, and evidence of childbirth at very young ages. One grave near ancient Thebes contained the skeleton of a woman in her early 20s. Beside her, a small clay tablet inscribed in Greek, "I am daughter of no one. I am mother of no one. I am the forgotten. Let this mark that I was no name." Just that. The philosopher Plutarch, writing centuries later, said something that echoes across time. We remember the battles. We name the generals. We build temples to the gods who gave us victory. But the price of war is always paid by those we do not name. The daughters of Hellas paid that price. Not with their deaths, but with their erasure. And as long as we keep reading the clay tablets, translating the inscriptions, refusing to let their voices be swallowed by time, they're still here. Not in the way they wanted, not in the way they deserved. But here,